Oh, RealPlayer, this one is a classic, so buckle up and get your popcorn ready. If you don't know what RealPlayer even is, I don't blame you at all because its cultural relevance has pretty much cratered since the 90s and early 2000s, becoming obsolete in the modern age. It was conceived as a web-based audio player in 1995 and evolved into a multi-platform, multimedia player that has one of the most infamous reputations in the world of software. You guys know the horror stories with different software over the years, like uTorrent installing covert Bitcoin mining software on your PC, or the Lenovo laptop Superfish scandal that was so bad the US Department of Homeland Security issued an advisory about it. There was even that time when Sony literally installed a rootkit on people's devices as a form of DRM with their CDs in 2005. RealPlayer is no different here, and it's had its fair share of pretty absurd controversies in its multi-decade run. It's a story as old as capitalism. A company creates a product or service at exactly the right time, and it's the first one to do it, but then instantly fucks up and squanders any potential they had in the span of a few years. The weird thing about RealPlayer, though, is that it's still alive today, even though the program has been almost unanimously hated by anyone who has had the misfortune to use it. Before we get into its many controversies and histories, though, we must first travel back in time to the mid-90s, when cell phones were still new and the Spice Girls were on top of the world. Okay, so let's set the scene. Michael Jordan had just returned to the NBA in 1995. Toy Story came out, proving that 3D animated movies could smash box office records, and the internet was also in its infancy, with hundreds of companies trying to take their piece of the newly minted online pie. At the end of 1995, only about 15 or so million people were using the internet at the time, which was comparatively small, but year over year that number would slowly balloon into the multi-billion number that it is today, where more people on Earth are connected than not. While all that was going on, a little company called Progressive Networks was founded just a year earlier, which weirdly enough was supposed to be a company that provided a distribution channel for politically progressive content online. However, that plan was very quickly abandoned in favor of something new. They realized that there was no way for people to play or stream audio through the quickly evolving internet and created the Real Audio Player in April of 1995. They advertised it through broadcasting baseball games, and it quickly became a monopoly for audio streaming online. And nothing ever bad happens when companies start becoming monopolies, right? With that foreshadowing out of the way, the company seemed on the up and up with massive success, and only 2 years later added video content to the RealPlayer. If you were online during this time period, you'll almost definitely recognize the extremely 90s layout and resolution of its interface, along with the green on black text common during that time. This is where the company got clever, because during this time there weren't many different formats for streaming or playing media, whether it was video or audio. So they created their own proprietary one called the Real format. This ended up being one of the smartest things the company ever did, because by the year 2000, it was estimated that over 85% of all streaming content was using the Real format. The issue was that even though everyone was using RealPlayer, nobody liked it because of how shitty it was when it came to speed and functionality. They simply had no other choice. RealPlayer was basically the Comcast of the media player world during the late 90s, basically allowing them to deliver the most fucked up product ever, and everyone kind of just dealt with it.
We don't give a fuck about you.
However, this would soon change with the company's many major disasters, the first of which happening in 1999.
Attorneys general from D.C. and 3 other states are suing Google, claiming the tech company deceived consumers in order to gain access to their location data.
So in today's world, collecting user data is pretty much normal. From Facebook and Google to TikTok and Spotify, you'd be hard-pressed to find a big technology company that doesn't do some type of data collection. But back in the pre-internet era, companies still did what they could to build a profile on their customers by keeping track of what they bought and when they bought it, but that was about it. Coming into the 90s, though, the internet changed all of that and ushered in a new era of mass data collection. And guess who was on the cutting edge of this morally ambiguous business practice? None other than Real Networks, who had installed spyware into their Real Jukebox portion of the RealPlayer. This spyware would send data back to Real Networks about what you were listening to, how long you were listening to it for, and when you listened to it. On top of that, it'd attempt to find your location by using metadata in your photos as well as early stages of facial recognition. It would also fingerprint the device that you had RealPlayer installed on. The most egregious part of it, though, was that they openly sold all of this data to not only advertisers but other third parties who were interested in purchasing detailed profiles about people. They quickly patched this out once it was exposed, but this was really only the tip of the iceberg when it came to people hating this program. In 1998, they made a deal with Microsoft to have it be included as an optional install when installing Windows, which massively expanded their user base. If you installed it separately, though, it was known for shoving advertisements to install other programs in your face like Norton Antivirus or annoying toolbar apps. Once installed, though, it had an uncanny ability to covertly make itself the default media player for any type of media that it could run. It also became harder than usual to remove off your PC, similar to some other programs that required third-party uninstallers to entirely get rid of. To top it off, it also had a habit of liberally changing Windows registry values, corrupting them, and making media fail to load. However, I think some of this could be forgiven if the app itself wasn't complete ass at doing the one thing it was supposed to do: play media. To add fuel to the fire, the United States Computer Emergency Readiness Team, which is a subsidiary of the Department of Homeland Security, has issued multiple warnings about Real Networks products being total dog shit. Despite all of this, though, the company has survived, including RealPlayer. Even though it had many problems, it was the first product of its kind and revolutionized the way the internet was used. If you squint really hard, you can almost admire its janky charm. However, we do still need to cover the 2000s up until the current iteration of RealPlayer. Real Networks tried many different things after their massive success in the late 90s. They were one of the first to attempt a streaming subscription service called Real Rhapsody in 2003, which was 3 years before Spotify saw the light of day. They also created the Real Music Store in 2004, which had DRM-protected digital music available to buy. None of these things worked out for them to repair their reputation, though. Not just because the RealPlayer was still kinda shitty, but being early to the party is just as bad as being late when it comes to innovations with technology. Not only did their new features fail, but the walls started closing in as other platforms started creating their own media players that were free and came pre-installed, like Windows Media Player or QuickTime Player. Now, let's not mince words here, Windows Media Player does not have a great reputation either. However, it did have one thing going for it, and that was that it didn't constantly barrage your screen with ads and pop-ups or track your every move. By the late 2000s, there were so many different alternatives to stream media like Pandora, Netflix, and Spotify that RealPlayer pretty much became useless. So how is RealPlayer even still alive? I'm gonna be honest here, I have no fucking clue. It's kinda like the Bayverse Transformers movies. It started with a bang and it was something we'd never seen before. Even though it had its faults, people were willing to look past them because of how bombastic and innovative the first film was. Slowly though, they totally lost the plot and still made money, but were never the same. And I think that's kinda how RealPlayer ended up. Thank you guys for watching, stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next video.